Hi, it's good to see you. Welcome.
You're back.
Yes. I hope you like it. Oh.
Yeah.
That's like a once in a lifetime. Hallo, Leute. Super. Ja, okay. Gut, super. Ja, gut. Gut. Und dann sitzen wir da her? Ja. Okay. Wir haben ja keine Panel Discussion. Nein, es ist einfach Pause. Genau. Sollen wir bei den Fachvorträgen, werden wir schon Fragen zulassen, oder? Wegen, also nur halt bei diesen drei Sachen, beim Kestutis, bei der Sabine Jülicher und bei der, da könnte man allenfalls Fragen zulassen. Was mit dem Namen?
Zwei Präsentationen gibt es noch, also
okay, das heißt, die Sabine Jülicher hat keine Präsentation.
Sonst hat mir niemand eine gegeben.
Okay. Der hat nichts. Ne?
Der hat auch nichts.
Muss man noch ein bisschen was dazu schreiben, was er kriegt noch. Maria Pilar Guardo Hernández. Hi, die Lichter sind super, danke. Ja, wir sind immer glücklich. Das ist schön, dass du hier bist. Super. Sehr gut. Den Zentrum aufschlagen.
Was anderes Zentrum.
Okay.
Sie sich, gell? Ja, nicht wahr sein. Ich hab sogar so. Jawohl.
Ladies and gentlemen, would you be so kind and take your seats, please? Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a particular pleasure for me to welcome you here in the Diplomatic Academy in Vienna on a very paramount topic for the Austrian presidency, human biomonitoring in Europe, science and policy for healthy citizens. Throughout the week behind us, also Vienna was more or less the capital for human biomonitoring. We had all the fora of this project here. We had very intensive discussions about the current state of play of this project and, more importantly, about the vision and the sustainability dimension of it. And today we will have a wrap-up and try to crystallize the state of play in order to deliver also a mandate for upcoming political discussions. But before we enter this scene, it's my particular pleasure to ask distinguished representatives to give us a welcome address. And firstly, I may introduce the Secretary General of our Ministry for Sustainability and Tourism, Josef Planck. Mr. Planck held several top positions in the Austrian economy and also in policy. I just want to mention that from 2000 to 2009, he was a Provincial Councillor for Agriculture, Environment, Nature Conservation, Disaster Control and Energy, with a particular focus on renewable energy in Lower Austria. And since 1.5 years, he's Secretary General of our ministry. Josef Planck, you have the floor.
Dear Thomas, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished participants, it's a great honor, a great pleasure for me to welcoming you in the name of the Federal Ministry of Sustainability and Tourism, but also in the name of our Minister Elisabeth Köstinger to this very important conference and meeting here in Vienna in a Diplomatic Academy. I hope you have spent already not only on fruitful discussions, so you could have enough time to see our capital city, Vienna, to enjoy Austrian foods, to enjoy Austrian hospitality. I can express, I'm not a Viennese-born person, but Vienna is a good place to work, it's a good place to live. Very warm welcome also from this side. Some of you have already coped with high workload in different governance meetings of the Human Biomonitoring for EU project throughout this week. The decision to call this conference was made last year together with the European Commission. Thank you all of you, our team, the team of the Commission, for preparation of this work. Very well done. Thank you very much for all. The aim was contributing to shaping the future of human biomonitoring in Europe. It's very important for the Austrian presidency. In Austria, we performed the first human biomonitoring study related to chemicals policy in 2005. A study on the concentration of polymask fragrances and in the blood of students, and since then we subsequently commissioned several studies also with sensitive groups such as children and pregnant women. We also participated in 2009 in the European program COFES, where stakeholders and scientists from 35 institutions in 27 European countries developed a harmonized approach, allowing for the first time to generate and process of comparable human biomonitoring data throughout Europe. Austria always strongly supports initiatives to perform an EU-wide human biomonitoring program, and I'm very happy that this HBM for EU initiative will, with a strong support of the European Commission and co-founded under Horizon 2020, was successful in bringing together so many countries, also from outside of the European Union. In particular, colleagues from DG Research and Innovation did excellent work to get this project off the ground. This involvement and all relevant DGs and European agencies from the beginning, together with the European member states, can become a prime example, a lighthouse, so to say, for setting the scene for such big European endeavor. A lighthouse to demonstrate also that the EU is able to achieve when all partners and all institutions work together in a constructive and targeted manner. I think at this point it's very positive and very necessary for our European project. In 2017, the Eurobarometer survey showed that a huge majority of 4 citizens in the European Union is concerned about exposure of chemicals in their daily life. This is a clear mandate for the authorities to make sure that the EU's chemical policy is in fact protecting people from health risk caused by harmful substances. Human biomonitoring can serve a lot to reach this goal. Firstly, it provides a more comprehensive view of the actual exposure of the population to pollutants. Secondly, HBM data on the actual body burden can help identifying substances of a very high concern under REACH and subsequently restricted low chemicals. Finally, we could see if political measure was successful when exposure levels in the population fall, or if they don't, we have to dig deeper on this issue. At this point, I have to raise one point which might be very important for the future. We have always better analysis. We will bring more information down to the ground. And it will be a question of responsibility and communication to deal with all this data, because the citizen may be also part of the public discussion. They cannot give the right answer if a substance is critical or not. They just read the long list. And it's need, I think, more responsibility and communication to raise the concentration to the critical substances and not having maybe a very strong public discussion just because we have more information than we had several years ago. That's challenging, I think, because our experience is that sometimes the public discussion about substances is many times not based on research, data, or on facts. It's one development we see, and it's challenging for everybody, but I think that HBM data are a very good and a very stable basis for this discussion. Austria would very much welcome, and European Human Biomonitoring Program on a structured and institutionally embedded basis. In this would inform and steer the EU's environment and health policy, while at the same time helping us again more systematic knowledge on the actual body burden of citizens and contribute to protect them with a special focus on vulnerable groups. In including, I may reiterate that Austria, as a current presidency of the European Council, is attaching high attention to this important topic. And against this background, I wish you a productive and successful meeting with tangible results. And of course, don't forget, enjoy your stay in Vienna. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Secretary General, for your introductory word. Josef Blank, very rightful, mentioned the paramount importance of the Commission in this endeavor. And therefore, we were in close contact with DG Research, and the Deputy Director General had an intensive email exchange in preparing his appearance here. Unfortunately, on very short notice, he had to accompany the Commissioner in a trip abroad. But it is with greatest pleasure that I'm welcoming the responsible head of unit, Maria Pilar Aguar Ferrandez, with whom we enjoy a very, very productive cooperation. She's head of unit dealing with innovative tools, technologies, and concepts in health research, and holds degrees in pharmacy and food science and technology. Maria Pilar, the floor is yours. Welcome.
Thanks a lot. It's difficult to be the second speaker when you have virtually said it all. Well, but anyway, thank you very much, everybody. Thank you very much, the Austrian Ministry for Sustainability and Transport, Secretary of State. Like you have virtually taken from my mouth what I wanted to say. It has been a real pleasure to work with you and with the Environment Agency in Austria, co-organizing this event under the auspices of the Austrian presidency. It has been really, really a great honor, a great pleasure, and we are extremely delighted to be. Now is the second time that we organize this event with the presidency. I hope that will be a third and a fourth and a fifth. So I hope that this really becomes a kind of normalized thing. Indeed, for us, doing this together, it's extremely important. We don't want to, the Commission doesn't want to work alone. And my Deputy Director General, Wolfgang Wurzer, was deeply keen to come. And unfortunately, well, the situation now with regards in particular to research is really demanding. Many of you know that today there is the Competitiveness Council, where member states' representatives are discussing the future of Europe in terms of research. Horizon Europe is being debated today, and that has impacted a number of us, the agenda of many of the senior officials But he asked me, please, to not only apologize on his behalf, but also to extend his best wishes for a very fruitful meeting. I'm sure that it will be. That goes without saying. I also would like to say that it's not only DG Research, many other DGs, and you will see that, are represented today. And I think that's worth noting, because this is not a single effort, this is not a normal project, this is not something we wanted to do on our own. This is something that has come, indeed, as converging needs of the citizens, but also demand of member states and also the research community. And the policymakers, indeed, have need of us to do a better work as far as we can, all of us. Indeed, the human biomonitoring is something that addresses these demands of the citizens, but also the demands of the policymakers. And it's true that Europe has a very good, in general, has very good regulatory systems and has a very high level of protection of the citizens. When you compare internationally, I think we can be very proud of it. And I think that's something that President Juncker has said in a way or another, an EU that protects. This is part of our mandate today. And I want this project to be a lighthouse, as you rightly mentioned. We want this to be just the first maybe cornerstone for something wider and something longer, because I think that we all recognize that human biomonitoring is not an easy task. It's very demanding in terms of resources, in terms of willingness also to share the data, to go beyond. It is not an easy endeavor, but we see that from the member states, all of you have this will to go ahead, to go together, and to do it better when we do it all together. So I think that this is something that we in DG RTD were very pleased to support, when there was this demand from the member states, demand from the stakeholders, and we wanted to, and we tried to catalyze and bring together all the actors. Because for us, bringing together communities of policymakers and scientists, I think this is the ultimate good value of this project. I think that is something that is at the core, at the heart of our endeavor, and I think that this is also something that is true for all of you. So, indeed, there is a lot to be done. Let's not be shy about saying that. It's not an easy thing. It's not something that we will accomplish in a couple of years. No, it's not going to be like this. But what I think it is important is that we are really putting the stepping stones, and we are really all committed to work along this path together. So in a way or another, human biomonitoring for Europe has also been, in this respect, one of the forerunners. For example, many of you are aware of the new data protection regulation, which has brought up some of the issues when it comes to shared data. And I really want to stress that in this case, Human Biomonitoring for Europe has done a remarkable work, and based on the system that the Commission has put in place, IPChem, many of you are familiar with this, which is the information platform for sharing data on chemical monitoring. Well, this was an effort of the European Commission, basically spearheaded by the Joint Research Center, but where we are sharing all the data. That doesn't come easy, but there are extraordinary efforts of being done on this, and I think we all have to be very proud that we are accomplishing things, and very proud of the high commitment of all the community to do that. Sharing data, it is already in itself a political commitment and political engagement, and I think that this is also some of the aspects that the Human Biomonitoring Initiative needs to be very proud of. So this is what is happening now. What about the future? Obviously, we're pleased to see that there are a strong call for, let's say, a longer-term sustainability, a longer-term initiative, something that will last and will provide the European policymaker, risk assessors, and scientific community with a tool to be active and be excellent in this field, where other international communities or other international initiatives have been also happening for a long time. So indeed, I think that there is this really very fertile already ground where we can build upon. But it's not for the Commission to do this on its own. We definitely have to and want to and will count with member states and other stakeholders, the agencies, the civil society, any single actor that can contribute is welcome and is called to contribute. And we really think that this is, again, only the starting of a very long and maybe not easy path, but we all think or feel that is the right path to follow. So I think that, again, I just want to wrap up by thanking everybody here to listen, wishing you a very fruitful meeting and looking forward, well, this presentation, inspiring presentation, and we will see what the conclusions are. Thank you, everybody.
Our thanks go to you, Maria Pill, and to the Commission for this excellent cooperation. Our final welcome address will be delivered by the Managing Director of our Austrian Federal Environment Agency, Georg Rebernick, when in one of his previous professional positions, he chaired the Council Working Party in the Environment during the first presidency of Austria in 1998. And I remember, as it was yesterday, that we struggled to deliver first Council conclusions on a new EU chemicals policy in this era, which wasn't an easy task, but it sort of kicked off the whole story. When he then in 1999 took over the position of Managing Director of the Austrian Federal Environment Agency, this was a strong institution with 220 people. Now more than 450 experts are in this private company today. It's a role model for many agencies, I think. And from the starts of human biomonitoring, indispensable partner who was always part of this European endeavor. Georg, it's my pleasure to welcome you. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Thomas. Good morning, colleagues, General Secretary, directors, heads of units, people from academia. I'm really pleased that you are all here with us today for this conference. Thank you, Thomas, for telling people that I'm already long in the business. So, the agency, when looking at this issue of human biomonitoring, on the one hand, the agency, my agency, is already looking back to say 15 years of work. I can very well remember when colleagues from our analytics department, laboratories came up and said, well, there is an issue from literature and we think we can do something about it. And we could look into samples if we get them. We are not used to deal with blood or urine or these kind of say, samplings, matrices. But it's an interesting issue because we see that it is coming up. We see that it has relevance. We see that in cooperation with other institutions, and it was a new topic, a really new topic in the beginning of this, say, last decade, this century. And they developed really on the basis of their own, in a way, intrinsic motivation and knowledge, methods, networks, activities. And this led to that in 2007 we started managing the Austrian Human Biomonitoring Platform, bringing together our own experts, not only from the laboratory, but also from the chemicals department in our house, which is doing risk assessment and evaluation of chemicals and biocides. I mean, so they developed a good cooperation internally, but also with other colleagues. And we started then with studies on a broad variety of issues. The exposure, or what we could find in vulnerable groups. So we managed to get blood from newborn babies and their mothers, from pupils, and then looked at where could this come from, what is in there, what should we screen, and where could it come from. We produced a study then in 2011, the first representative study in Austria on human exposure to various industrial chemicals. And then almost 10 years later, and you see this is not done overnight. over 10 years later, since 2016. This platform has been acknowledged officially by the ministry, the responsible ministry in Austria, as being an official advisory body to the Ministry for Sustainable and Tourism. But it was clear from the outset, right from the start, also from the literature we received at that time, that measurements and also measures cannot be limited to a national level. They have to be integrated, say, in a European perspective, in European activities. And since 2017, and that was a big ambition of us, we are involved in the largest transnational human biomonitoring initiative at EU level, which is this famous project, Human Biomonitoring for Europe. But still, and despite all the efforts we did in chemicals policy and management of chemicals, we are still and will be ongoing in a globalized world exposed to a complex mixture of chemicals in daily life. The examples are numerous. Just think of plastic softeners in food packaging or PFCs in textiles, to name just a few examples, and you all know more of them. So I think it's therefore really important that we look in exactly this issue, namely we have to know about the properties of these substances, how they end up in, say, our bodies, and to what extent, and what risk then finally they pose to human health. I think this is also the reason why this issue still is very much in the realm of research, of the research community. When I would compare it now as an environment agency person to other issues we are dealing with, looking at air pollution, waste management, water pollution, then this has I think, a much longer history. And comparing, I could see, okay, and in all these areas we have monitoring obligations, reporting obligations, quite well established. So maybe this is one of the perspectives we are going to, but I acknowledge very much that we are still in earlier stages, so we are dealing with these issues already for 10 or 20 or more years. So human biomonitoring, and this is, I think, without discussion, is an indispensable instrument to tackle these risks. And I think it's also without discussion, as I said, that we have to do it at European level and integrate it in European mechanisms. And I think the fact, and we counted it, that we have experts and colleagues from 35 countries gathered here in Vienna highlights absolutely this fact in an impressive way. What we also learned during this project is it is very much about the involvement of different stakeholders. And I think we can not only be proud about achievements, but we also can be grateful for the possibility in Europe and in our countries that we can integrate our expertise and our institutional knowledge into such networks. And it is about talking to each other. So in a way, dialogue is the order of the day. And it's exactly this purpose we organized this conference with our partners. I'm very thankful to all who contributed to organizing this conference, not least the staff at our own agency. Thank you very much. I know how engaged you have been. So keeping this in mind, I wish you exciting, not only speeches one way, but as I said, dialogue to each other and interesting discussions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Georg, for closing this round of welcome addresses. All speakers up to now highlighted that human biomonitoring is an instrument informing various policy areas, be it food protection, be it environment policy, be it chemicals policy, and we will now dig into the first area, how human biomonitoring is informing. This is chemicals policy, and this is my particular pleasure to welcome my dear friend Kęstutis Sadauskas. We also spent a couple of years together in the management board of the European Chemicals Agency. Kęstutis holds master degrees in political science, international relations, and geography. And from 2010 to 2014, he acted as head of cabinet for Commissioner Semeta, and holds now the position of Director for Circular Economy and Green Growth in the European Commission. Kęstutis, the floor is yours. Welcome.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you particularly, Thomas, for the kind words and for the invitation. I can reciprocate the friendship and the respect towards you and also towards the Austrian presidency for being active on this front, not only on the biomonitoring issue, but in general on the chemicals. I can testify that we feel the heat from the Council on the chemical area, and that's very good because there is so much going on and there's still so much to be done that that support and that pressure really helps us. What I would like to do is to walk you through the general picture of the chemicals regulation in Europe today and what the future might bring. We can ponder on when everything started, but probably one of the highlights in the history was the story by Rachel Carson on pesticides. The name was The Silent Springs, and it was the story about the effect of the pesticides on wildlife and birds, and it really shocked the world. And that happened 55 years ago. 51 years ago, Europe gave itself the first chemical safety legislation, Dangerous Substance Directive, which does not longer exist. But that was the very start of Europe doing something about it. And today in the European Union, we have more than 50 years of the EU legislation on chemicals. And I think we can, by looking at ourselves, looking with the hindsight, and especially looking to the rest of the world, we can state that we have built up a pretty solid framework. That framework, of course, is a lot more complex than you can see here, but it's an attempt to really simplify it and to put it really in a nutshell. Thomas, you said that it probably started in 1998 with the Council conclusions, which triggered off a complete rethinking of how chemicals policy needs to be regulated. I thought the landmark was the white paper of 2001, but you're probably right, because the precursor for that was indeed what the Austrian presidency did, and which led in a complete rethinking, complete change of the paradigm of how chemicals have to be addressed. As a result of that white paper, and as a result of a major reflection and the policy attempts, and rather successful ones, we have some horizontal legislation which cover substances and mixtures, namely REACH regulation as well as the CLP regulation. We also have legislation that is specific for certain conditions, such as occupational health and safety, or environmental legislation on water, on waste. And we have legislation that is specific to products, pesticides, biocides, cosmetics, and a number of others. The white paper of the beginning of the century put forward a number of the principles that have since been achieved in our legislation. And the key was the reversed burden of proof, and that was an ideological choice. I understand it was not an easy one, but it really changed the game. Industry now must prove that chemicals they produce are safe, and that also means that if there is no data, there is no market. Companies have now registered the properties of the chemicals, and the non-confidential data are publicly available in the European Chemicals Agency. And the product-specific legislation was also revisited, partly as a result of that horizontal legislation, partly as a result of its own development. So there's a lot that has been happening over the past 10 or 20 years. Again, No data, no progress. This is quite an important realization, triviality, but it's true. Thanks to the laws in Europe that we have right now, we have been able to gather a lot of data. REACH regulation is now 10 years old. It's not much, but it has achieved quite a lot. Other chemical legislation is either a bit more than 10 years old or less, but around the time. And in today's world of better regulation, that means that we have to look back into what has been achieved and where we go next. And in parallel, this means that time for projects such as the human biomonitoring for Europe has also come. It means times also for systems such as information platform for chemical monitoring, and I will come back to that in a minute. But first, let me go to some of the reviews that we have done and the lessons that we have learned. What have we found out? Well, you have seen the REACH review. It's the second one that has been conducted. The findings have been released in March this year, and it has shown that REACH has generated a comprehensive data and assessment system for chemicals on the European Union market. REACH was designed to improve the protection of human health and the environment, and on the basis of the review, we can say that chemicals have become safer because we manage their risks better. Chemicals pose risks worldwide, and that's why REACH influenced legislation in other countries. We know for sure that is the case in China and especially in South Korea, but also wider. We know other regions, other countries are looking in REACH as an example. There are countries who have gone in another direction, not necessarily in the bad one, but in completely different direction. For instance, United States. There they have a different concept, but it's quite interesting to see. I just got a report from colleagues in Washington who have been attending various events where their Toxic Substances Act, which is now 2 years old, has been reviewed and how it is going. And I have to say that compared to where we are, United States, well, let's just maybe rephrase that. We are way ahead. We are way ahead. I think we're ahead by decades. Compared to where the United States is. So this is, I think, what we should be really proud. I know this is being web streamed, so I hope that I won't be getting the diplomatic demarches about that. But if there is one area where Europeans can be proud, where you can say there is no one better than we are, chemicals is one. But it doesn't mean that we are perfect. Doesn't mean that there is no big road ahead of us. Thanks to REACH, the registration procedure greatly helped the communication about chemical risk in the supply chain. And there is an estimate, it's a rough estimate, it's a macroeconomic estimate about the benefits. But we, I think, are pretty confident, at least in order of magnitude, that the benefits for the human health and environment that REACH has brought, and also in interaction with other chemical legislation, or will have been bringing over the 25, 30 years, is 100 billion euros. Roughly 50 billion euros for environment, 50 billion euros for health. Of course, there are costs, and those are not trivial. Those are not insignificant ones. But they seem to be justified by the results that we have observed and the benefits that are starting to materialize. We have made progress in assessing the substances of very high concern, such as the persistent bioaccumulative toxic, or the carcinogens, mutagens, and reprotoxics, and the endocrine disruptors as well. Well, besides REACH, we have several dozen pieces of law in the EU, and we have been looking at those as well, and especially through certain angles, through how hazards and risk are interplayed and regulated. And we have not finished it yet. So what I'm showing to you right now has not been fully vetted. But these are results that are coming out from the fitness check that we have done also for other pieces of law, starting with the CLP, but also looking into how that translates into another 40 laws of the European Union. And under that fitness check, the result of which I hope that you will be able to see, if not before the end of this year than in the beginning of next year. We have found that chemical legislation led to notable reductions in exposures to some specific hazardous substances that have been targeted over the last 3-4 decades, such as lead, mercury, benzene, asbestos, PCBs, and other toxic chemicals. Well, the report, the draft report that we are now refining states that the 50 years of continuous efforts have put the EU in a position where we have data to take effective chemical risk management decisions, and that these data are to a great extent reliable, they're reproducible, and they are of good quality. Our legislation has clearly led to significant benefits in terms of avoided health and environmental impacts, and some of the clearest benefits relate to reduced exposure to chemicals in the workplace that are known to increase the risk of cancer or cardiovascular disease. The key benefit drivers include the avoided healthcare costs, avoided productivity losses due to avoided lost working hours or as a result of illnesses or premature deaths, avoided suffering and premature deaths beyond the working conditions, avoided remediation costs such as wastewater or the drinking water treatment costs, and avoided degradation and environmental ecosystem services costs. All that really adds up to pretty big numbers eventually. But we feel that we are not there yet. Yes, we can be the best in the world, but there is a big space ahead of us that needs to be covered. The review will show that there are still ongoing exposure situations to hazardous chemicals that need further attention and research, such as CMRs at the workplace, endocrine disruptors, or toxic chemicals in the aquatic environment. Even today, we struggle with some important knowledge gaps in our understanding. Again, endocrine disruptors and the combination effects of chemicals, for example. We keep on observing trends in human health and environment impacts, cancers, reproductive diseases, effects on insect or bird populations, and there could be many different causes for this mixed picture, and a lot more research is required before we have all the answers, if we'll ever have the answers. Now, the other paradigm and the other major project that's been ongoing is the circular economy. This is the realization has come that we can't live the way we've been living right now in the extract, make, use, and dispose patterns, and we have to rethink completely what we're doing and how we're living. And in the circular economy, nothing needs to be wasted. Nothing can be wasted. In fact, waste becomes a resource, but this raises serious questions about toxic substances in products and waste. We want to strive for non-toxic production cycles, something that we are already trying to enrich by phasing out the substances of very high concern, but we have an issue of legacy toxic substances in waste. Is this a new resource or not? And very often we're faced with a major dilemma about recovering of the substances. On the one hand, we say that we want to return something back in the economy. On the other hand, we know that something that may have not been toxic 10, 15, 20 years ago has really changed. And we may not necessarily want to get it back into economy, so we have to look for other ways. And it's pretty strong and big dilemma that pitches various economic actors and social actors, various stakeholders, one against each other. And this is where we need to have an aligned understanding and interest. So these are our challenges for today, which we have addressed specifically for the circular economy in the so-called interface between the chemicals, products, and the waste legislation. May sound a bit generic, but behind that, there are big political and societal choices to be made. Now, let me go to the monitoring. The more data we have about chemical occurrence in people and environment, in our food, in our products, the better we can target our policy. You will have heard about the information platform for chemical monitoring, and there will be a presentation about it, but I just want to underline its importance. We need to populate the IPChem with good data. We feel very excited about human monitoring for the European Union, for the data it will generate, so that we can check whether we are on the right track, the better target on our next steps. There are issues that need to be resolved, such as looking at into the occurrence of the chemicals all across their life cycle. We need to see and think what we do with the research that has been done there, but is hanging somewhere in there, is not really being put to the use of science and the regulation. We have to make sure that the data is comparable and that it really also helps with the reporting. By the way, thanks to the IPCAM, we are able to think how we can reduce the environmental reporting bureaucracy, rather heavy burden on our public administration, on our businesses. If we find something that is smarter, that is in real time, we can really forgo some of the reports which get outdated by day and which cannot in the end serve the regulatory purposes. So human biomonitoring and all other kind of monitoring that can be stored in IPCAM fills these gaps in our knowledge, and development of IPCAM as a tool is a contribution from us, and we also making sure that it is compatible with the new policies of the data protection, as we know. This is another area where I think Europe leads. It does come with cost, but at least we protect our people not only against the chemicals, but also against the intrusion in the privacy, and sometimes all these areas need to interact in a smart way. This work will never stop. Our tentative program for the coming years towards 2030 is to improve and increase data. These data should be, we believe, centralized somewhere, and one of the options is in the European Chemicals Agency that hosts the biggest database on the chemicals in the world, and that database is increasing, and it probably is only natural that when they collect data about the chemicals, the occurrence also needs to come into the picture. But this is a decision still to be made. We want to improve the implementation of our rules in phasing out the most toxic chemicals and to ensure non-toxic production cycles. Our current data have served all the EU chemicals legislation I mentioned in the beginning: REACH, CLP, pesticides, biocides, occupational safety, food safety, and many others. And the data that will be generated by human biomonitoring project will be most welcome for our future policy development. So we have again a big road ahead of us. I think very often we say that we stand at the crossroads, and probably on the chemicals we are standing there because we have done major reviews. There are a few other reviews that are ongoing, and they will paint a picture which is very likely to command further actions and further rethinking, akin to what has been done, be it in 1998 with the Austrian findings, or with the ones that we have done in a white paper in 2001. And once we are in that situation, we'll need to be consulting very widely and making decisions where we go next. But that will really depend on how fruitful discussions of today will be and how they will inform all those decisions. So thank you very much for your attention. All the best.
Thanks to you, Kęstutis, for opening this first window into the first policy area, which is informed by human biomonitoring. This is more or less the essence of our morning session, to give you a flavor what is the political background, what policy areas are being informed, and what policy areas on a political level in the European Union do already today cooperate so intensively. And of course, this is also the recipe for a sustained human biomonitor solution in Europe. But let's shed some light on the second policy area, which is informed by human biomonitoring data. And of course, this is food safety. And it's my particular pleasure to welcome Sabine Jülicher for giving us the next political environment impression. She holds degrees in veterinary medicine and food hygiene, and is currently director in the European Commission DG Santé for food and feed safety innovation. And she's responsible for policies relating to a large range of sectors, such as food information composition, food waste, food processing, and many more. And she will give us the impression how human biomonitoring is informing food safety policy. Another management board colleague and dear friend, Sabine, welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Thomas, for the kind invitation. Good morning, everybody. I'm really pleased to be here to talk about, what Pilar actually mentioned very, very right. We are here not only to discuss a very interesting research topic. We are here, and in particular, the EU policy directorates and the policy makers, we are here to understand how all of this, what comes out of research, how we can best use it and make the best effect in policy making, in decision making, in risk assessment and risk management. And as you said, I'm here on the policy area of food safety. And I think also it has been alluded to when we spoke about communication on chemicals. I see that a lot, in particular in the area of food safety. Communication is an issue. People are extremely concerned about the safety of their food. They're very worried about chemicals in their food, and I think some of the data on the Eurobarometer comes also from that particular angle. However, I would like to start by saying that actually the use of chemicals in a very broad range of products, such as medicinal products for humans, for animals, for use in agriculture and pest control, actually provide numerous benefits to society. And I think that is also a starting point for the discussion. On the other hand, as we know, human and environmental exposure to chemicals, and in particular to hazardous chemicals, may represent a risk to health, the environment obviously as well. So we do have to look at this in a balanced way. Looking from the food safety angle point of view, the discussion on the history of our legislation is also very interesting. I can safely say we're working on an EU set of rules and measurements and policies for more than 50 years. And I would say in the area of food safety, we have really come to a point of very comprehensive, very strong regulatory framework which is there to ensure a high level of human health protection. I'm confident to say that we do achieve that. I'm not going into the comparison with other areas of the world, but I think we can stand here proudly saying and looking at our achievement. How do we get there? How do we get to make these policies work for the citizen? Obviously, regulatory risk management to ensure a high level of food safety. All these decisions are based on risk assessment. That is the step before the risk management. In our case here in Europe, we have the benefit of very reputable agencies, for example, the European Food Safety Agency, the European Chemicals Agency, but also the European Medicines Agency, who carry this out this task of risk assessment to a very high standard and a very high degree. And again, I can safely say these are world-class agencies. And their existence, that's also part of our regulatory framework that we have built up over the past 50 years or so to give us this reassurance. In the area of food safety and the context of food, regulatory measures, as I say, do ensure a high level of food safety because we have the principle that chemicals which come into contact with food, such as biocides, pesticides, food contact materials, veterinary medicines, that they are only authorized when the resulting residues in food and feed are considered safe for consumers. So we have this upfront risk assessment. We are reasonably confident, actually we are very confident that whatever is left in our food is eventually safe for consumers. However, and I think that has been alluded to before, this principle is questioned when there are findings of residues in human matrices and when there are observed adverse health effects. And rightly or wrongly, there is then the questions, do they have to be, these health effects, do they have to be attributed to the presence of residues of these authorized chemicals in our food? And I think this is a very legitimate question of society and citizens. And it is one that we should strive to answer. And there comes the first and a very important obstacle in making a judgment on such statements, because we do not have, or there is a lack of harmonized information at European level concerning the exposure of citizens to chemicals in food and their interplay with other concurrent environmental exposures or societal factors such as lifestyle and their impact on health. So, in other words, it's extremely difficult to establish a clear relationship between the exposure to chemicals through food and the adverse health effects. And that's actually what we as a risk manager, as a policy maker, need to know, and as I said, what citizens want to know and are entitled to know. Has been already alluded to several times that citizens are exposed to a complex mixture of chemicals in their daily lives, be it through food, drinking water, the environment, food contact materials, or at work. So for many chemicals, and that is, I think, also what we have to say at this moment in time, the health impacts over a lifetime associated with the exposure to certain chemicals remains to a certain extent unknown. There are major gaps still today in knowledge to fully understand the health impacts of exposure to mixture of chemicals. There's also, in many cases, a significant degree of uncertainty in the exposure estimates, which are based on occurrence data in food and consumption data, which are used in risk assessment. So that's where human biomonitoring comes in, where there is the added value, as it has the potential and can provide more certainty as regards the reliability of the exposure estimates. I mean, we are always making very elaborate estimates, exposure scenarios. They are as good as the underlying data and the underlying information that we have to do that. What is also very interesting from a food safety point of view is that human biomonitoring data can also be linked to epidemiological surveys, which then eventually should provide more accurate information on the relationship between exposure to a certain chemical or mixture and the possible adverse health effects. This project is really important to contribute and provide scientific evidence on possible causal links between exposure and adverse health effects. That is what we need to get to the bottom to. I also would like to say a few words of the information platform for chemical monitoring. Kestutis spoke about that, IPChem. This is the online data access portal hosting available occurrence data, and it should be hosting data which comes from a range of sources, from the Human Biomonitoring Project, for example, but also chemical concentrations measured in the environment, in food, in feed, in air, and so on and so forth. And it has been developed with the aim of increasing the accessibility of chemical monitoring data. And I think that is also a very important aspect of nowadays and today's discussion, to have a platform, to have an information tool which is transparent, which is accessible to everybody, not only for the inner circle of a couple of interested, but to everybody. It is indeed important that this platform hosts all data available and enables to link the human biomonitoring data to the presence of chemicals across different media, such as feed or food or the environment. And as I say, it should increase our understanding. In my view, and my view as a representative of DG Santé, it is really regrettable that there is still a lot of data, in particular on feed and food, which are available, we know that, but they're not yet accessible via this platform. Therefore, in all instances, in all bodies, including our own EU agencies, hosting such data should continue efforts to make this data accessible via the platform. But I think it's a greater plea, and I think this is, if that platform is to perform the value, the added value we wanted to do, this is what has to happen. Linking the findings of the human biomonitoring data to the presence of that chemical in food or food contact material should also provide reliable information on the sources of exposure and should enable risk managers to identify the main sources of exposure, because once we understand that, we are able to regulate. And I think that is also really one of the challenges for a regulator and a risk manager, to fully understand the picture and then take the right risk management decisions. Take the example of cadmium. I know that there is currently a file on the table of the Austrian presidency on fertilizers, and for anybody even just superficially looking into the press reports, we know that cadmium is currently a sticking point. Human exposure to cadmium occurs mainly from consumption of contaminated food. That's something we know. It also comes from active or passive inhalation of tobacco smoke and inhalation by workers in the non-ferrous metal industry, and more general from environmental exposure. We know all of this. We also know that there are adverse health effects that are linked to the exposure to cadmium. And now, coming from a food safety point of view, in Europe we have established maximum levels of cadmium for a very wide range of food and feed. So from the regulatory point, we have done what is needed and necessary, and what, on the basis of the risk assessments we have nowadays, needs to be done. But clearly there are questions, such as, are the observed adverse health effects related to ways of exposure other than food, or are they related to the consumption of food exceeding these EU maximum levels, which had not been taken off the market, basically where the enforcement had failed, or are the current EU maximum levels not sufficiently health protective? We have all these questions in the back of our mind. And that's where we again see the potential of the human biomonitoring data, by which adverse health effects can be linked to exposure from food or a particular source and the contamination level of the food consumed, or to other ways of exposure. And for example, if we knew more about that, we could have also an answer in the ongoing discussions as regards the maximum level of cadmium in fertilizers, because that's what it's all about. The fertilizer and the cadmium levels there, to avoid that they are of any negative health impact through the presence of cadmium in staple food, which we consume in the EU nowadays. So, moving towards the conclusion, human biomonitoring is really an important and indispensable tool to generate knowledge, to take evidence-based targeted risk management measures, and to further improve food safety, all with a view to ensure a high level of human health protection. I would also think we are at not the very beginning, but somewhere we are surely not at the end of the process, and I alluded to some of the issues that we still need to manage to bring together so that risk management can truly benefit from the project. But Besides these already mentioned undisputable benefits for public health, the initiative is also important to, on the one hand, harmonize procedures for human biomonitoring and to provide comparable data on human exposure to chemicals and mixtures. And I think this can also not be underestimated. We need comparable data. It is nothing worse than a raft of data which, for one or the other reason, is not comparable. It is difficult, very difficult to work with that. The other important aspect is the further assessment of potential health impacts of chemical exposures in different age groups and across genders, as well as exploring the impact of factors such as socioeconomic status, lifestyle, diet, and environmental conditions. And as many times said before, the effect of exposure to mixtures of chemicals and the search for emerging substances which may serve as early warnings in the future. All of these are very important aspects and positive aspects of the project. So to conclude, this initiative is serving us, the policymakers, by providing evidence to prioritize our actions and measures for policy making, and to really also evaluate the effectiveness of policy measures which are aimed at reducing the exposure, because that's what we want to see. We don't only want to see a regulation and a publication in the official journal. We want to see that this has a positive effect on the health and the safety of the citizens, and the project has the potential to help us there. It's therefore really, and I can only underline what has been said before, it's of major importance that this coordinated effort at EU level is continued beyond this project, and that all who have available, usable, comparable data, that they feed it into the information platform to increase the direct benefit from that system. With that, I hope you will have had a little insight into the link of food safety. And as I say, it's hardly any topic that is more interesting and relevant to the European consumer than the safety of their food. So with this, I think I would like to conclude, and thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
Thanks to you, Sabine. So it's about environment policy, the whole range, what we heard about chemical policy and now food safety. These are the main policy areas informed by human biomonitoring, a tool which is placed on the science policy interface. And this is where also research policy comes in. And I think it's time now to get a flavor of the state of the art of this project. How is it handled in the European Union? Where is the project status? And can we see it as a nucleus for further development? And it's a particular pleasure for me now to welcome the coordinator of this HBA Move for You project, Marike Kolosa-Gehring. She's a toxicologist heading the responsible unit in the German Environment Agency, and also informed our national human biomonitoring endeavors to a large extent. It's a very great pleasure to have you here, Marike. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much for this nice introduction, Thomas, and also for being the chair of our governing board, which is a great support for us. Okay, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity here to share some information about HBM for EU, the European Joint Programme to improve health and environment in Europe. We are working at the Science Policy Interface for a healthy future. That's the goal of us being representatives of scientific agencies, universities, and other scientific institutions. We come from the whole spectrum of Europe. On the right-hand side, you can see which countries are part of HBM for EU. We are an initiative of all in all 28 countries, plus the European Environment Agency. 24 of them are EU member states, the others are associated countries plus Switzerland. The European Joint Programme will run in this first step for 5 years, and we have a budget of about 74 million euro and are funded by under Horizon 2020. Besides working on European harmonization and establishment of a network, we also build capacities at national level. We have very different states of experience in the different European countries, and became aware that for a good European policy, we also need a good basis in the different partner countries. In this whole process, we include not only ministries of environment and health, but also the national human biomonitoring and research programs, research institutes, and of course the stakeholders. Altogether, we are aiming at developing a sustainable biomonitoring platform for Europe. So this is a somehow new and innovative program, because we all are aiming at answering policy-relevant questions, and that is our major goal, and the whole program is tailored to fulfill, to reach this goal. And for this we have introduced a number of new elements which are not established in many or most other programs. First, we have integrated the political decisions makers right from the beginning on, and that was when we started to design our research and policy program. Then we have developed an ambitious research program around these policy questions, which is just tailored to answer these questions. Then we have all agreed contractually to give directly access to results and data. Many research projects prefer to publish 10% and just keep 90% for other purposes, or just they go into the next round of applications, and here everything that has been produced is directly accessible. And we of course have agreed upon sharing data and samples from relevant European studies, so that not just those member countries who are conducting these studies can make use of them, but also all our HBM4EU partners. So then we have built a network of national ministries and the governing board, our highest decision body, constitutes of the representative of the owners of the national programs. For example, in Germany, the population representative German Environmental Survey is financed and owned by the German Ministry for the Environment, and that is why the German Ministry for the Environment is part of the governing board. The grant signatory is our agency, German Environment Agency, and so we have sometimes in the governing board the representations of the ministries, which are not in any case the contractual partners of HBM4EU. And we decided to go this way because if we want to build up something sustainable, which really helps further developing policy, then we need the support and the clear input from ministries for health and the environment. Okay, then we have established a very extensive exchange of experiences. We build upon what has already been achieved in Europe, so there's no reason to reinvent wheels, and so everyone brought in the knowledge, experience, and materials they had already, and of course we promote the national networks to give their input. In preparation of our application, we have done a first prioritization round under inclusion of the EU Policy Board, which is a group consisting of representatives of several general directorates as well as of some of the EU agencies. They gave their input, but also key players and ministries from the and relevant agencies from the different partner countries. We ended up with these first 9 substances or substance groups, for which we have then designed our work on exposure evaluation using HBM, effects analysis by introducing new and innovative research method, and of course for which we have started to develop a transfer plan from results into policy. We have most currently done a second prioritization round employing the same players at EU level as well as at national level, and the second list consists of these 9 substances or substance groups. There are some which need to be followed up, even though we already know a lot about them, like mercury, but we decided to follow up because of the Minamata Convention and also for checking up the success of our regulations. But we also included new things like aprotic solvents. That's a group of technical solvents used, for example, as graffiti removers, but they're put on the list of substances of very high concern under REACH, and so we thought it's extremely important to follow up how the people living in Europe are exposed to these substances. And these second-round substances will now be also integrated in our work program in all the 16 different work packages. I said already, we agreed on making data available, and there's a clear synergism between HBM for EU and IPChem. IPChem is a free accessible platform which provides a good access to the data, and HBM for EU will help fill these data bank with information. The existing data, individual, aggregate, and metadata will be fed in by our partners. This process has already been started. And the newly generated data under HBM for EU will in any case be individual data, which then will be fed into this database. And of course, we have there some terms of cooperation and use of the data, but for next policy decisions on these chemicals, hopefully you can come back and use information about the real exposure of humans, and that is biomonitoring data, because from our European experience we know even though we have very good models, sometimes there were clear discrepancies between the exposure as modeled and the exposure found in human bodies. And the exposure found in human bodies is, from my perspective, the more relevant one, and which really gives proof that we allocate the rare resources we have in the most effective way, because sometimes we overestimate exposure, sometimes we underestimate if we just go by, well, model results. So, but IPChem is for us a central tool, and there's an example, some metadata sets are already fed into IPChem, and this process is now continuing, and I expect in the next year that we will double, triple, or even more the amount of data being in this database. So we want to produce, and we need to produce, biomonitoring data for the whole of Europe. And we decided to follow, for a representative assessment of exposure of Europe, the United Nations Geoscheme on sub-regions for Europe. That means north, south, east, west, here indicated by different colors. And we decided to bring together data for about 3,000 children, teenagers, and adults. In each group will measure a set of different chemicals, and here just indicated by the figures you can see how well we covered the member countries, the partner countries, as well as Europe with this kind of investigation. You know, we tried here to give you also some information about where we measure children and where we are going for adults, and according to toxicological considerations, we decided not to do every chemical in each group, but this here is the frame which we have developed. So time frame, the development of protocols and standard operating procedures and all these technical stuff takes, of course, a lot of time, especially if 28 partners feed in their views, expectations, and experiences. We have managed that successfully and are now in the phase of preparation of field work, and will do the chemical analysis in the next year. Interpretation of these values is of very high relevance, because if people donate their samples, they later will ask us, what does it mean when I have 1 milligram of DINCH in my blood? And for this we need toxicologically based guidance, and that's why we decided to develop health-based guidance values for the most famous reproductive toxic phthalate, DEHP. We have developed health-based guidance values for children as a most susceptible population, as well as for adults and workers. And the same have we done for the DEHP substitute DINCH. And as you can here easily see, there's about an order of magnitude between the effectiveness of DEHP and DINCH, which also can allow us to recommend to use DINCH in comparison to DEHP, which is now fortunately nearly banned. So, okay, these values have been approved. We followed the following procedure. We have developed, in a close cooperation between German Environment Agency and ANSES from France, these values. We have sent them out to all the national hubs, which are now being organized in the partner countries. They could share this information, get the input from all the experts in their country, which they felt should contribute. This response was fed back to ANSES and UBA. Then we have build up a revised value, which was then improved. So that was the first step. 2 substances for 2 other phthalates, one DN-butyl phthalates and one which is a longer chain phthalate, which is less effective and which is also used as a substitute. We have also developed new values, but they are currently under review by the national experts of the member countries. Risk assessment, well, is finally our major target, because our ambition is to improve health and well-being of people living in Europe by supporting the further development of chemical policy. And human biomonitoring has been used in different risk assessment procedures, as for example by WHO in cases of lead, or chromium and several others, or it's used in the Canadian Chemicals Management Plan. They decide about risk or no risk with the integration of biomonitoring data. They have applied it in several examples. And of course, under REACH, also biomonitoring data were used in the dossiers for the restriction of reproductive toxic phthalates, or for the authorization application for the aniline derivative MOCA. But up to now, we have not a systematic approach and a clear role. What do we prefer, biomonitoring data or model data, if we have both available? What criteria need biomonitoring data to fulfill to be the method of choice for assessment of exposure? And in HBM4EU, we will supply to policymakers, science and citizen, accurate data on current internal exposure to chemical from all sources, taken up by all routes, and that's the difference to the systematic which we follow in our chemicals regulation. One focus mainly on food and feed, others focus on industrial chemicals, others on medicals. And by HBM, you get information about integrated and aggregate exposure at all. So in HBM4EU, we will also provide information on toxicokinetics, which is not necessarily required in the established safety assessments of chemicals. And of course, we will work on bridging with new conceptual developments, as, for example, adverse outcome pathways. And all in all, we want to contribute EU-wide with quantitative information on external exposure markers, effect markers, and health effects to establish a relationship between internal exposure and health effects. Mixtures, biomonitoring is the best instrument to describe mixtures in people. If I'd analyzed your blood or urine, I'm sure I will find 300 to 400 different substances at least. And how we deal with that is an open question, and that is why HBM4EU, together with 4 other big research projects on mixture research, funded by under Horizon 2020, developed together a position paper, which was then sent out to the General Directorates for Research, Health and Environment. It takes position on gaps, be it concerning research, be it concerning actions or risk assessments. And this position paper was then co-signed also by more than 100 other additional researchers and stakeholders. Our concrete work in HBM4EU according to mixture includes the identification of most relevant chemical mixtures in the German population using biomonitoring data in EU-wide but also global cooperations. Then, of course, we are currently in the preparation of a pan-European survey on pesticide mixtures by use of suspect screening, which is also an innovative approach. And we will work on a number of case studies, inter alia, on the anti-androgenic chemicals and male reproductive health, or some flame retardants and developmental neurotoxicity. We will start there with the assessment of mixture groups. Results are nice, but without communication, no one can really make use of it. That was why we established our website, where we have an online library. You can find every deliverable which we have produced as soon as it's finished on our website. You can load it up, load it down, follow up, and have contact details, but we have also produced more targeted information material for the general public, like a leaflet or a newsletter, or of course something for stakeholders, and some fact sheets, very brief information for consumers. So the results can be found on the website under deliverables. And there in detail, you can see what's interesting for you. It's a very transparent process, which allows also partners which are, or our networks, which are not part of our initiative, to feed in our work and to make use of it more or less immediately. They are freely accessible, and they are published, as I said, in a very timely manner. So thank you very much for your attention. We are an initiative of more than 110 partner institutions. It's a really challenging process to bring all together these views, but if we manage, I think we can really make a big step forward. We share this responsibility between especially the work package leaders, which all together build the management board, and that is why I would especially thank my work package leaders and all our wonderful partners, and you for your attention.
Thanks, Marike, for completing this initial picture we will spend the day with. I think we deserve now a coffee break. Coffee is served behind this door in this room over there. Please try to be back at 11. Thanks once again to our welcome. Was it los? Yes, please.
So sorry for stepping between you and the coffee break. It is, I have a request for the last panel session. We want to involve the audience, you, as much as possible then into finding the solution on how to give human biomonitoring a more, how would I say, stable framing. And in this respect, I would ask you to participate if you're interested in posing questions. And we will do it a little bit different from, say, other conferences, not so much sending the microphone around, but to invite you to use your smartphones and this application. So I think it's not even an application, it's just a website where you enter by entering this code. And then I think it's rather easy and self-explaining how you can formulate your question, short and precise. And then the second option you will find is not only to pose questions or give short statements or give short advices where the direction should go to, but also to like questions or comments by others. We have the possibility then to in a way rank the questions and comments given by number of supporters. And we will post then these questions or give these comments to our panelists and ask them for their opinion. So this is how we will organize it. And you have time to enter your questions or to like other questions and comments from now on until, say, the coffee break before the final panel starts. If there are any questions, my colleagues will assist you, but I think I understood it, so it should be rather self-explaining. Thank you very much.
Oh.